This episode is brought to you by Typekit, the easiest way to use web fonts. Typekit pioneered the usage of CSS web fonts nearly 2 years ago and continues to be the leading source for designers and developers today. Sign up at typekit.com for as little as $4 a month and get thousands of high-quality fonts from the likes of Adobe, FontFont, Mark Simonson, and more. The hardest part is deciding which font to use. Try Typekit risk-free for 30 days at typekit.com. And by Tasks from Idea Division. Tasks for iPhone and iPod Touch is a simple yet sophisticated application to keep track of your to-dos, notes, due dates, and priorities. With Cloud Sync out of the box and coming soon to the web too, it's their take on connected task management. Learn more at taskapp.com. Welcome to the Changelog episode 0.6.2. I'm Adam Stacoviak.
And I'm Wynn Netherland. This is the Changelog. We cover what's fresh and new and open source. If you found us on iTunes, we're also on the web at thechangelog.com. We're also up on GitHub.
Head to github.com/explore. You'll find some trending reposts, some feature reposts from our blog, as well as the audio podcast. If you're on the Twitter, follow Changelog Show and me, Adam Stack.
And I'm Penguin, Pengwynn. Fun episode this week. Talked IronJS with Fredrik Holmström, way over in Sweden, about IronJS that sits atop F#, which sits atop .NET. Some really cool low-level stuff this week.
It's nice to see some .NET coming into the stream here.
Yeah, hopefully we'll get some more of that. Speaking of JavaScript, we'll be at Texas JavaScript. At least I will. You going?
I'm thinking about it.
Thinking about it. On June 11th in sunny Austin, Texas, Doug Crockford and others will be there at the premier regional JavaScript event. It was fun last year. Wouldn't miss it again this year. Speaking of regional conferences, we'll be at Lone Star RubyConf in August. Calls for proposals are now open. So if you haven't submitted to speak at Lone Star and you're a Rubyist, then what are you waiting on?
That's right. And we'll also be at RubyConf in Argentina, Buenos Aires at November. Well, we won't be there, actually.
We won't be there. Actually, we're trying to get a special correspondent. Ernesto Tagworker down in Buenos Aires is hoping to cover that for us.
There you go.
Way down there.
November 8th and 9th. Check out rubyconf.com/ that's not a slash, it's a dot. .com.ar. It's kind of odd.
You know, we love regional conferences. I think that's where the conversation happens in a lot of these communities. So if you're organizing a regional conference and want to promote it on this here podcast, let us know how we can work with you to get the word out about those.
Absolutely. Submit at thechangelog.com.
Fun episode this week. Should we get to it?
Let's do it.
We're chatting today with Fredrik Holmström from IronJS. So, Fredrik, why don't you introduce yourself and a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, okay. I'm a software developer at Crispin Porter Bukaski at my day job. Just quit today, actually, but that's irrelevant. I work on IronJS in my spare time, which is really I do pretty much only .NET programming nowadays. I've done PHP, Ruby, JavaScript, the whole shebang, but I got stuck in .NET a couple of years back, and, well, I like it here, so...
So IronJS is a JavaScript runtime for .NET written in F#. So for our listeners, there's a lot to unpack there. So let's start with F#. What exactly is F#?
Well, F# is a functional programming language, ported language from Microsoft from Visual Studio 2010, which is like last April, I think. Yeah. I mean, it's based on the ML style, like ML, OCaml style languages. I would almost call it like an OCaml dialect, but not quite. It runs on .NET, interops with like C#, VB, whatever you can run on .NET basically. But it's functional, so you have the whole like static assignment, like immutability, stuff like that built in.
So IronJS is a JavaScript runtime built on top of that. What's the use case for having a different JavaScript runtime on top of .NET?
I mean, on top of .NET, like when I started, there wasn't really any JavaScript runtimes available. If you wanted to use JavaScript as a scripting language for your application or a game or whatever, there's this JScript thing that Microsoft uses in IE. but it's pretty bad, and the integration with .NET is very flaky and weird. So I started IronJS in December of 2009. Sorry. Mostly, the original thing was that I was going to use it for like a database, like a NoSQL database I was working on. But then I found the whole JavaScript runtime a lot more fun to work on, so I just scrapped the other project, and I've been working on IronJS ever since.
So you support the regular .NET framework, but also Mono. What was involved in getting it to run on Mono?
Not a lot, actually. Like changing 2 references and compiling, basically. It was almost painless.
I know you're on Windows as we're recording this podcast, but are you playing around with Mono on Linux at all?
Yeah, I have a a dual boot or whatever into Ubuntu. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Ubuntu, whatever you call it. That I run usually just the latest version of everything. I think it's 11.04 or something. And I run Mono develop and stuff like that, so I can make sure IronJS constantly compiles on Mono.
So I got to ask you, the trend in naming ported languages to Microsoft's frameworks as Iron something, where did that come from?
I think it's, a homage, yeah?
Right.
To the original developer who developed the original implementation of IronPython, way back before the dynamic language runtime existed. I think that's the history of it. I'm not quite sure. But, you had Iron Ruby and IronPython, so when I was going to name my little thing, I was just okay, IronJS, why not? It's the obvious choice. But I don't know exactly where the prefix iron comes from.
So what about JavaScript support? What version of JavaScript, or I guess an ECMA standard, are you supporting?
Currently just 3, which I'm very sad about, but we're working on the EcmaScript 5 compatibility. Yeah, compat.
Mm-hmm.
And it's trucking. It's going to be a couple of months before it's fully in place. I have one guy helping me from the States, John. Thanks, John, by the way, if you're listening to this. He has helped tremendously. So we're working, but we sort of got sidetracked with performance because it's a lot more fun to work on.
Sure.
Graphs going down and down and down. It sort of more gives you a better gratification than. But we're getting back on the EcmaScript 5 horse right now to get that done.
What's the practical impact of supporting through JavaScript 3? What sorts of applications can be ported? Can you run Node on this?
Yes, in theory. There's one guy I talked to today, actually, that's working on Node.js for .NET using IronJS.
One of the things that fascinates me about, I guess, the .NET framework is that it's kind of the inverse of a lot of frameworks out there. The Unix community tends to find the best in breed tool for the job, and with the .NET framework, you've got multiple languages that compile down to one framework, right?
Yeah.
So in theory, you could do the same thing with, I guess, CoffeeScript that you're doing with JavaScript, correct?
Yeah.
Without having to go through the JavaScript layer at all.
Yeah.
Have you played around with CoffeeScript at all?
So you mean basically getting a native parser for CoffeeScript that would run on top of IronJS? Is that the...
Or even bypass IronJS and go directly down to the F#.NET.
Oh, you mean just parsing CoffeeScript basically straight off,
right?
And going straight down. I've been playing around with getting a native parser for CoffeeScript because that speeds it up by a lot. But I haven't touched CoffeeScript in the regard of just compiling it straight to .NET because that would have to be a completely separate project from IronJS.
So in the previous episode, we covered PyPy, and it has some .NET extensions that can be compiled for Python. Is there any sort of ability to load .NET assemblies using IronJS?
Since I'm using the dynamic language runtime, you have pretty much access to all of C# inside of the JavaScript if you choose to. If you're hosting it in an application or a game or something, you probably want to limit what the user can do, because otherwise you could intrude. You have the security implications of letting the user do whatever they want. But yes, you can access pretty much any functionality from .NET inside of IronJS.
But this would be a great way to expose a scripting interface for your application to third-party developers.
Yeah, exactly. And then you have sort of you want to limit what they can do. but that's a different issue. But yes, you can access all of .NET inside IronJS.
So back to Mono for a second. Have you built anything with Mono?
Yeah, small things. Like I use they have the C# scripting ability. Like you can use C# as sort of like a shell script language or something like that. I played around with that a bit, but I mean, I haven't really built anything specifically for Mono. I build a lot of stuff that I've made sure that runs both on Mono and on Windows or the canonical .NET implementation, but nothing Mono specific,
We need to get Mono on the show. It's a fascinating little application.
Yeah, I mean, I've been speaking to Miguel, Miguel de Casa.
Sure.
I probably butchered his name to no end there, but I mean, he's a really nice guy, and there's the Mono team also there. And I mean, the Mono project itself is, I mean, it's insane how well they're doing. I mean, yeah, they're backed by Novell, but still, I'm thoroughly impressed by the progress and how good it's coming along.
In your introduction email that you tipped me off to this project, it sounded a lot like a lot of the letters I get from folks in the .NET community. And usually it starts out, you guys don't cover .NET much on the podcast, but here's a great project I'd like you to take a look at. The reason we don't is because they're so hard to find. We're trying to make inroads into that community. Talk a minute about the difference in, I guess, open source philosophy between the .NET community and the rest of the web world.
I mean, I think the .NET community, and I can see this even like when I'm working professionally, is basically based on closed source, on proprietary software. I mean, there are usually like, you can find the occasional like open source plugin to like the CMS you're using or whatever. But and I mean, there are a few open source CMSs like Umbraco and a couple of others. But I mean, the community as a whole and like all the products that Microsoft sell that concern .NET, it's all closed source. There's very little open source. I mean, F# I would say, is mostly open source. I mean, even F# itself is open source, actually. So you can download the compiler and mess around and everything. But looking at C# and VB, it's all closed source, straight through, basically. And I mean, I learned programming through like C and PHP and Perl and Python and stuff. So I mean, I miss the open source perspective you get in the in those languages and the like Ruby, JavaScript world and stuff. But yeah,
one of the things that I really enjoyed coming to the Ruby community from the .NET community was just Ruby gems and the package management. And I know Python has PyPy or pip rather an easy install. Is NuGet this answer for .NET?
Yeah, I'd say it is. I use it for pretty much everything now. I install it as soon as I install Visual Studio. I install NuGet and use it for pretty much everything. It's been working flawlessly. I mean, and what I like about it is that it's not only for like .NET assemblies. It's for like pretty much anything, like JavaScript files, templates, like whatever. It's not only for libraries.
Do you know when you install packages via NuGet, does it also put things into the registry?
Not the foggiest, actually.
That's just curiosity. We should have those guys on the show, but I guess with Windows, even with the .NET applications, there's still that registry component still in Windows, correct?
Yeah, like the global assembly cache.
Right.
Or like registering it in the GAC as
the GAC.
The people in the know say the GAC.
That's a word I haven't heard in quite some time.
Yeah. I don't know. I've never gotten used to how the whole assembly cache thing works. It's just awkward. I think the way they present it and the way it's used is really awkward. It's just I want my DLLs in a folder and that's the version I use and I'd just be happy with them. But they insist on putting them freaking everywhere.
So NuGet is the package management piece of that. But if you're looking for open source in .NET, where do you go?
Codeplex. I said codeplex.com or is it .org? Yeah, I think it's .com. And that has most of the open source .NET stuff. There's another place called, I don't remember the name. But I mean, GitHub has a lot of C# projects also. I noticed just a couple of days ago. Sadly, not so much F#, but I suppose the language is sort of like a niche language. But yeah, I'd say GitHub and the Codeplex, definitely.
One aspect of, I guess, .NET, probably the ecocenter or the epicenter of that is is C#. It's just the biggest footprint. And it's just unfortunate that is a special reserved character. So it's just not search engine friendly when you're finding a lot of C# stuff.
Yeah, I've had problems because I've been looking for jobs occasionally around Sweden, and you can't search for C# because the search input boxes don't accept the pound sign. So it's like
well, it's the same with .NET. A lot of times you'll see C# spelled CSHARP, right, and .NET spelled DOTNET.
Yeah, because you can't search for .NET either because like invalid characters, only alphanumeric plus the Swedish extension characters. So it's like okay, well. But Java, of course, works.
So you mentioned a number of languages that you, I guess, learned on prior to .NET. What sort of perspective has that given you in writing .NET code?
I'd say the biggest impact that especially Python had on me, or Linux as a whole, because I did used to use Linux a lot a couple of years ago, or like 5-6 years ago. Is the whole like async and many processes, like one process compared with one thread compared to like monolithic process with like 40 threads, which is like the Windows model, and sort of the asynchronous style of programming that Node leverages, but also like that's very common like with the epoll and select calls, and that's I think is the biggest influence that I prefer to think in async and processes instead of like threads and I don't know, wait handles, I think they call it in .NET, yeah.
What sort of advantages do you think a .NET developer has over a Unix developer?
I'd say because you get used to handling threads in .NET pretty fast. And I think that's the main thing. Multi-threading is really freaking hard. And I mean, no one would ever claim to be good at it, I think. But at least I'd say that I'm decent at it. And I have friends who are like, Python or PHP, and PHP might be a bad example, but Python and stuff like that. And there's no real multi-threading there in the way you do it in .NET, and you don't learn that because that's not the Unix model. Basically, you small tools, one process.
So you mentioned that F# is a functional language. Is it compiled or dynamic?
It's compiled. It's statically compiled, but it's type inferred. So you basically don't have to like type out the types if you know what I mean. It's so it infers most of the types from the way you use the variables and the constants and stuff.
So you're writing JavaScript on top of this in IronJS. So you're straddling that line between compiled and dynamic. What aspects of both of those worlds do you like?
I have to say, like, if I'm using like C#, as I grew up with like PHP, Python mostly. I did some JavaScript, like when the HTML around 2001.
Right. Which a lot of what we call AJAX is actually just DHTML. If you're not making a network call, it's DHTML, right?
Yeah. But just like everyone remembered, like, and you'd search for this like little snippet on the internet to like scroll the status bar and the text would scroll and stuff. But sorry. Anyway, I think the main drawback of like the statically typed languages, if you look at like Java and C#, is that they're so verbose. Like it's the amount of like physical code and characters you have to put down, like plink down on the keyboard to be able to produce something is quite staggering if you compared it to like JavaScript or something. But if you're looking at F#, for example, it's a statically typed language and it has to be like, you can't like make it dynamic where you want, like with the dynamic keyboard and C# or stuff. It's statically typed and that's it. But the amount of code, if you look at lines or like amount of characters, it's almost equal to JavaScript because it's so terse. If you have a language like that, that includes like Haskell, F#, stuff like that. I see very little benefit of being dynamic. But if you're comparing dynamic like JavaScript versus C#, then I see a benefit of being dynamic because of the amount of code you don't have to write, basically.
So the last time I did .NET professionally, it was ASP.NET. It was before the MVC release. So are you doing much on the web with .NET?
Yeah, my day job is pretty much, I do the heavy backend lifting, but I plunk some like web forms and stuff at time. Not a fan at all.
So it seems like that when .NET came out, Microsoft tried to take a desktop abstraction or a paradigm and write an abstraction web forms, right, to expose the web to folks that aren't used to writing web applications. And it was just a crazy, weird abstraction in hindsight. Yeah. Have you seen a philosophy change at Microsoft over the last 10 years at all? Are they really embracing the web, or is it still an embrace and extend philosophy?
I mean, with MVC3, I didn't use the first one, but the second and the third one, it's, like, but I mean, coming from Python and PHP, like the thing they sell in like ASP.NET, MVC3 and stuff, is stuff I saw around 2005. It's like, but this isn't really new. Like Ruby on Rails did this 6 years ago or like 5 years ago or whatever. So, I mean, I don't think they embrace and extend as much, but the stuff they release is stuff that everyone else has been using for years currently. That's the way I look at it, at least. So
at least on the web with Ruby and Python and other frameworks, there seems to be a myriad of server choices that you can deploy to, right? There's, even in the Ruby world, there's Thin and Unicorn and Passenger, and we just have a host of different choices. On .NET, are you still tied to IIS?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, but I don't see it as a bad thing, really, because at least when I do stuff for work and, like you do applications for different companies and stuff, they picked .NET because it's a Windows platform, and that's because they have a Windows network, which means they have an Active Directory. Like they want everything integrated. Like the IIS and .NET and web forms, even it's just like it just works. You don't need to really do anything. Like all the permissions work, like logins, everything just work. So IIS brings a lot of benefits in terms of integration with other Microsoft systems like AD and stuff.
The other difference that seems to come up quite a lot between .NET developers and I guess open source or Unix developers, and a lot of times this is more of a corporate versus startup type of mentality, is in .NET, a lot of times in Java, you're tied to an IDE, whereas in other languages, people prefer text editors. Where do you hang out all day?
I swear by Visual Studio. Pride from my cold dead hands.
Oh yeah?
Oh yeah. It's. I mean, once I got used to it, I will not ever program without an IDE ever again. It's. I mean, I started doing .NET fully around 04, 05 maybe, and I mean, it took a while to get used to Visual Studio. Definitely, but now it's, I mean, the amount of help it gives, especially when you're writing code like C# code or Java code, which is very verbose. The amount of, I mean, it gives you so much assistance. And even like if you're looking at someone else's libraries, you can just like jump around, like the go-to definition stuff. And then when I at times have to open like a PHP project at work and I'm just completely lost, like I've lost the skill of navigating code without an IDE, sadly.
I used to be in that camp where I couldn't do anything without a GUI menu to do it for me. But since moving to Ruby and Rails and embracing kind of the Unix philosophy, I find myself writing my own little scripts to automate a lot of what I do on a daily basis. To what extent can you automate Visual Studio?
You can do pretty much whatever you want. I mean, Visual Studio has a rich extension gallery nowadays at least. I know it was been building up since 2008, and now 2010 has it integrated even. And I mean, there's extensions for pretty much everything you could possibly get. There's even a Git extension now that actually works. So I'm using that for like the small things like committing and updating.
I'm glad you brought that up. So is there any traction for Git and Mercurial and the open source or .NET community outside of Team Foundation Server?
I mean, I think Mercurial, so I can't pronounce that being Swedish, has more traction than Git in the .NET community, I think, because Codeplex has a HG like repository option next to the normal Team Foundation, I think. But I mean, I use Git, and I know a lot of other .NET projects use Git also. I mean, for me, I don't know. Git just clicked, so I stuck with that.
So, when you're not hacking on IronJS, what open source projects just have you dying to play with?
I've been meaning to get more into Node. I love the whole async idea. And I mean, obviously, a lot of other people do also. I mean, I've been toying with Node like a bit on my Ubuntu, dual boot or whatever. But I don't know. It's like I haven't had time to fiddle around with open source projects for ages because like I've been working and then I've been doing IronJS for like 8 hours every day for the past year. So it's like, well, I don't know. I do look at some other C# projects though, like the Kayak HTTP server.
Mm-hmm.
I've been meaning to play around with that because that's like an integral part in getting or important part in getting the node for .NET running.
As a .NET developer, who's your programming hero?
Oh, I don't know. I gotta say Sid Shaw. I like that guy. He's a complete asshole, but like I like him. I'm sorry.
We're fans of Zed. Zed was on an episode, a highly edited episode, but he plays in a lot of different, I guess, playgrounds. I mean, he's made friends and enemies in Ruby and Python, and I guess now at least one friend in the .NET community. So what's got you excited about what Zed does?
I mean, I just like his like brutal honesty. I think that's what I mean. First of all, he's a really good programmer, obviously. But I mean, like Morris had persona. Like I like his brutal honesty. I mean, he goes overboard a lot, but at least from my perspective, I mean, I've never met the guy, but yeah. Or I mean, but if we're talking like programming, it would have to be Miguel from Mono. He's such a nice guy, and he's like so scary smart. It's I mean, at work, like you think you're the hot shot, and then you talk to someone like him, and he's like, oh God, I need to go back to school for 15 years to catch up with him. It's
So since .NET is backed by Microsoft, are most of the thought leaders in the .NET community at Microsoft, or are there other folks in the community that are bearing the standard?
When you're talking about, like, I'd say if you talk about the core .NET stuff, of course, Microsoft, like, the community doesn't have that much control. But if you're looking at F#, and F# really is the oddball here. Because, like, Don Syme, who's also, that's another programming here, actually, who's also, like, insanely smart, who's the main architect behind F#. I think he's also one of the main architects behind generics in .NET. I mean, the F# community is very open. And it's like there's a lot of discussions, and there are a lot of people from the community who are involved. Or F#, I'd say the community has more influence than the other stuff. But like C# VB and stuff, I think it's, from my point of view, it's all Microsoft, and you just have to live with that.
You know, a lot of the, I guess, sharing that happens in the Ruby and Python and Unix communities happens at user groups. Are you involved in a .NET user group?
There actually is one here in my town in Sweden, Gothenburg. I've been trying to look them up, but I don't know. It's I know the thing is that it's mostly like those user groups are mostly like C# and stuff. I've been trying to like find an F# user group in Sweden, but I think we're like 3 F# programmers in all of Sweden.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't know. It's I mean, those are mostly F#, and they usually, they talk about like this CMS systems and, like the client, like CRM systems and stuff. And that's not really, I mean, what I'm interested in as a person. I prefer sort of like the open source, more the like the tech projects, like hacking on compilers and stuff compared to discussing the latest CRM system released by some company.
Do you have a favorite F# feature you would like to see in another language?
I mean, this is a functional feature, but it's pattern matching by far. Discriminated unions and pattern matching. Those things are just amazing. It's, I mean, those are the 2 features that made me choose F# for IronJS, basically, because of how easy they make parsing and like building syntax trees and stuff.
How large is the IronJS project, roughly in lines of code?
It's tiny. It's like 11,000 lines. Which is nothing for a compiler or a runtime. But I mean, the runtime is .NET, but like a compiler.
How many contributors?
There's me and this the guy named John. I can't pronounce his name though. I think it's John Gitsen. He lives in the States, but he has a really funky last name. I'm sorry, John, if you're listening to. Oh, he helped a lot on the EcmaScript 3 conformance tests. He did, I'd say, about half the work there.
So looking at the IronJS website and the benchmarks that you've published, you mentioned earlier that these were fun. So what makes benchmarking fun?
I don't know. Isn't there just something inherently fun over being fast? I don't know. I don't know. I think it's, it sort of gives you sort of like a receipt of your efforts. Like that you actually made something that works and that's fun, fast. I mean, sorry. It's sort of like it's the own validation. It's like I've actually built something and it works and it runs fast compared to the competition. Competition or whatever you want to call it. And seeing that little bar decrease even more, I think we're down to 2,900 milliseconds now for all of SunSpider.
I think you asked me, isn't that fun? For me, no, it would not be. But, I'm thankful for guys like you. So here's the deal. I play where the user meets the machine, right? And somebody has to have a business benefit for it, for me to get excited about what computing can do for them, right? But I am so thankful that guys play at the lower end or the deeper end of the pool, right? And do things like this to make the whole effort faster.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't even really know why I like it. Like I said earlier, I drive a motorbike in my spare time.
Yeah.
And I suppose that goes fast also. So I suppose there's some correlation there.
So you just like speed in general? Yeah,
just speed in general.
So Fredrik, where can folks go to learn more about IronJS and get involved?
IronJS.wordpress.com or IronJS.net. And of course, github.com/fhalm/IronJS, which is the main repository.
And follow on Twitter at IronJS.
Yeah. And I am FJ Holmström at Twitter.
And we'll put all of that in the show notes. So thanks so much for joining us and telling us a little bit about IronJS and F# and giving us, a whole slew of projects that we need to have on the show in the future.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been a blast.